I still remember the day my life took a turn I never expected, never dreamed of, and if someone had told me beforehand that all of this was going to happen, I probably would have run away, probably would have laughed it off, probably would have said you are out of your mind. But what happened, happened, and today I am going to tell you the whole story, word by word, moment by moment, because if someone else out there is hiding just like I was, if someone else is lying awake at night trying to listen to the voice inside themselves and getting scared every single time, then I want them to know they are not alone, not even a little bit alone. My name is Zion. I was 22 years old at the time. I lived in a middle-class home in Karachi, with 3 brothers and 1 sister, with a strict father who never said much but whose single glance could silence an entire room, with a mother who took care of everyone around her but never really spoke about what she felt inside, and me. I was hiding behind a wall that I had spent years building with tremendous effort. The name of that wall was Stay Normal. That wall was my identity, my protection, and my biggest prison all at once. Certain things are not easy to talk about in Karachi. Certain things are not easy to talk about anywhere in the world. But in Karachi, in my home, in my family, absolutely not. So I stayed quiet. Always quiet. In school, in college, among friends, I would meet everyone, laugh, talk about cricket, discuss movies, occasionally say something about girls that would make everyone laugh, and I would laugh too, because that was what you did, that was what normal looked like. But at night it was different. At night, when everyone was asleep, I would sit alone in my room and feel something inside me that I could not explain. A longing. A feeling like I was playing someone else's role in my own life, like I was in a play and my real part was something that I was not allowed to perform on stage. I would stand in front of the mirror and sometimes think, what if I were different? What if my world were different? But even thinking that was frightening. So I would shut that door and try to fall asleep. Then Arisha came into my life. Arisha was my university classmate. She was studying fashion design and she had a project, a documentary-style video in which she wanted to explore body image and identity. She chose a few people for her project and I do not know why, maybe coincidence, maybe fate, maybe that reason we can never fully understand, she chose me too. She said, Zion, you seem very authentic. There is something about your face that the camera catches. Please be a part of our project. I said no at first. Then she insisted. Then another friend said, come on man, just do it, what's the big deal? So I agreed. The first few sessions were very simple. Sitting in front of the camera, talking about myself, answering some questions about who I was. But Arisha's style was different. She did not stay on the surface. She went deep. She asked me one day, Zion, do you think the version of yourself that you show to the world, is that truly your own identity, or is it something else? I stopped. For the first time I tried to actually hear that question properly. I said, what do you mean? She smiled and said, I mean what you feel inside, when no one is around, is that different from what you present to the world? I took a sip of water. For the first time my eyes filled up just from a single question. I said, a little. That a little was the biggest confession of my life up to that moment. Arisha stayed quiet. She did not judge anything. She just nodded slowly and gently said, thank you, that was it. I started crying. In the studio, in front of the camera, I started crying and I did not understand why. Maybe because for the first time someone had asked and I had answered. For the first time that inside thing had come out, just a little, just a small door had opened, but it was enough. It was enough to start flowing. Arisha did not ask me anything more after that day. She did not pressure me. But a few days later she messaged me, Zion, I have a proposal. Listen to it first, then decide. I need a specific scene for my documentary that explores the concept of transformation, physically, emotionally, both. I want a subject to go into a completely different look, a fully different appearance, and be honest about that experience. I know this is unusual. But I also know that maybe you are the most right person for this experiment. I read the message again and again. 3 times. 5 times. I typed, what do you mean by a different look? She typed, you decide. I will only create a space where no one judges. Whatever you feel, explore it. I read that message, put my phone down. Thought I would not do it. Then an hour later thought I would. I did not sleep that night. I kept turning over in my bed thinking about what she was really offering. Was this a trap? Was this some kind of joke that would go around the whole university? Was she secretly laughing at me? But then I thought about the way she had sat with me that day in the studio. The way she had not flinched. The way she had just said thank you like what I shared was something precious, not something broken. I had never had anyone look at me like that. Like what was inside me was worth something rather than worth fixing. By morning I had made my decision. I messaged her, okay. But I need rules. No one else sees this unless I approve it. No names. No sharing without my permission, she replied within 2 minutes, obviously. This is your story, Zion. I am just holding the camera. We met 3 days later at her studio space, which was actually just a large room in her apartment that she had converted into a workspace with ring lights and white walls and fabric samples everywhere. Her roommate was out. It was just the two of us and one camera on a tripod. She had set out a clothing rack on one side of the room with an assortment of things she had designed herself. Feminine cuts, flowy fabrics, layered textures. Nothing extreme, nothing costume-like. Just clothes. Just beautiful, soft, intentional clothes. She said, take your time. There is no rush. Look through what is on the rack and if anything calls to you, we can talk about it. Or we can just talk first if you want. Or you can leave. All of those are completely valid. I stood there for what felt like 10 full minutes just looking at the rack without moving. My heart was beating so fast that I could feel it in my throat. I kept waiting for the part where I would suddenly find this ridiculous, where I would laugh and say, okay Arisha, great experiment but not for me, but that part never came. Instead my feet carried me slowly to the rack and my hands, without me consciously deciding anything, reached out and touched a soft sage green top with subtle embroidery around the collar. And I felt something. I am not going to pretend I can fully describe it. It was not happiness exactly. It was not excitement exactly. It was more like recognition. Like picking up an object you forgot you owned and feeling the familiar weight of it in your hands. Like your body recognizing something that your mind had been refusing to admit for years. My fingers stayed on that fabric for a long time. Arisha said nothing. She just watched. Finally I said, can I try this? She said, of course. I went behind a curtained area she had set up. I stood there holding the top and I was shaking. Not from cold. Not from illness. Just from the sheer enormous weight of what I was about to do. This was just a piece of fabric. It was just trying something on. People try on clothes all the time. But for me in that moment it was not just a piece of fabric. It was 22 years of a locked door. It was every night I had stared at the mirror and shut the thought down. It was every time I had laughed at something I did not find funny because laughing was easier than being honest. I put it on. I stood there for a moment. Then I stepped out from behind the curtain. Arisha looked at me for a second and then she smiled. Not a teasing smile. Not a pitying smile. Just a warm, genuine, bright smile like someone who is genuinely happy to see another person show up as themselves. She said, Zion, you look really good. And something about the way she said it, not as a compliment exactly, more as an observation, more as simply stating a fact the way you would say the weather is nice today, made me feel like I had just exhaled a breath I had been holding since I was about 9 years old. I looked in the mirror she had set up in the corner of the room. I did not recognize myself. And that was the most extraordinary part. I did not feel like I was in costume. I did not feel like I was pretending. I felt, for the first time in a very long time, like I was looking at something that made sense. Like a painting that had been hanging slightly crooked on the wall for decades and someone had just gently straightened it. Everything was the same and everything was different. Arisha said, do you want to go further? I have some other pieces. We do not have to. This can be exactly where we stop. But if you want to see what else feels like you, we can keep going. I said, keep going. She brought out a skirt, a long, draped, dark navy one that moved like water when she held it up. She brought out a light cardigan, soft earrings that clipped on, a pair of simple flats that were close enough to my size. She did not rush me. She did not make commentary. She just laid things out and stepped back and let me decide. And I kept deciding yes. With each piece I kept deciding yes. And with each yes something inside me got a little louder, a little clearer, a little less afraid. By the time she sat me down and did the lightest, most minimal makeup, just a little bit of coverage to even things out, a soft tint on the lips, nothing dramatic, nothing transformative in the theatrical sense, I was not shaking anymore. I was breathing normally. I was sitting there looking at my reflection and something in my chest had gone very, very still. She said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it for a long time. Long enough that the silence stretched out between us like a conversation of its own. Then I said, "I feel like myself." And then I started crying again. But differently this time. Not the confused, overwhelmed kind from the studio the week before. This was quieter. This was the kind of crying that happens when something you have been grieving for a long time without even knowing you were grieving it suddenly becomes, even for just a moment, okay. When the thing you thought was wrong about you turns out to not be wrong at all. Just unexplored. Just waiting. Arisha handed me a tissue and sat down on the floor across from me and said, "You do not have to do anything with this, Zion. This does not have to mean anything specific. It does not have to go into the documentary if you do not want it to. It does not have to go anywhere outside this room. But I want you to know, what you just did, showing up for yourself like this, even just here, even just for an hour, that took real courage." I wiped my face and looked at her and said, "I have never done anything like this before." She said, "I know." I said, "Does it show?" She laughed, a real warm laugh. "A little bit," she said. "But in the most beautiful way." We talked for 3 more hours that afternoon. Not about the documentary. Not about the project. Just about life. About growing up feeling like you were a slightly wrong shape for the world around you. About the exhausting performance of being exactly who everyone expected you to be every single minute of every single day. About the loneliness that lives inside that kind of silence. Arisha shared things too. She told me about her own years of pretending to be someone she was not in the same way, but in her own way, and how the day she stopped pretending felt like standing outside after years of being indoors and realizing you had forgotten what fresh air smelled like. I went home that evening and I sat in my room and I looked at the mirror, and for the first time in my memory I did not turn away from what I saw there. I just looked. I let myself look. That felt like progress. That felt like something real. But then the hard part started. Because the world does not pause when you have a realization. Life keeps going. My father still sat at the dinner table asking about my studies. My brothers still called me from the other room to watch the match with them. My mother still knocked on my door with tea at 10 o'clock at night. And I sat in the middle of all of it carrying this thing that felt enormous, this thing that I had no language for yet, this thing that was quietly rearranging everything inside me whether I wanted it to or not. I went back to Arisha's studio 2 more times over the next month. Each time felt a little more natural. Each time I arrived less nervous than before. She never pushed me to define anything. She never asked me to put a label on what I was exploring or who I was becoming. She just kept creating that space and letting me fill it however I needed to. She introduced me to some of her friends, other people in her design program, a few of whom had their own complicated histories with identity and appearance and the gap between who they were and who they showed the world. They were kind. They were normal. They were funny and interesting and real, and none of them looked at me with the curiosity or the alarm I had always imagined people would look at me with if they knew. That was its own kind of transformation. Not the clothes. Not the mirror. But realizing that the catastrophe I had been bracing for, the rejection, the ridicule, the disgust, was largely a story I had been telling myself, assembled from fear rather than evidence. The world was not as small as I had been living in it. But then something happened that I had not prepared for. My younger brother Faris came home unexpectedly one afternoon when I had gone to pick up something from Arisha's place. Nothing incriminating, nothing dramatic, just a book I had left there. But Faris, who was 19 and curious about everything, happened to run into Arisha in the street on his way to a friend's house nearby, and she did not know who he was, and they got to talking, and she mentioned that she was working with his brother on a project about identity and transformation, and she was so genuinely enthusiastic about the work that she said more than she perhaps should have, nothing specific, nothing explicit, but enough that when Faris came home that night he knocked on my door with a look on his face that I had never seen before. He said, "Bye, I ran into your friend Arisha today." My heart stopped. He said, "She seems really cool. She told me about her project." I said, very carefully, "What did she say?" He sat down on my bed like he belonged there, like this was the most normal conversation in the world, and he said, "She said you were the bravest subject she had ever worked with. She said you showed up in a way that most people never do." He paused. "What does that mean?" I sat down on my chair. I looked at my hands. I thought about 22 years of that locked door and the wall I had built and all the nights I had turned away from the mirror. I thought about Arisha's studio and the sage green top and the draped navy skirt and the way my hands had not been shaking by the end. I thought about what she had said, that what I had done took real courage. I looked at my little brother. And I told him. Not everything. Not all at once. But enough. I told him that I had been exploring something about myself that I had been afraid of for a very long time. I told him that Arisha's project had given me a space to do that. I told him that I did not fully know yet what it all meant, or where it was going, or how to explain it in a way that fit neatly into words. But I told him it was real, and it was mine, and I had needed to find it. Faris was quiet for a long time. So long that I started to wonder if I had made a catastrophic mistake. So long that my stomach was doing things that stomachs should not do. Then he looked at me and said, "Bye, I knew something was different about you. I could always tell. I just never knew what it was." He paused again. "Are you happy? Like, does this make you happy?" I thought about the mirror in Arisha's studio. I thought about that word, recognition. I said, "I think for the first time I'm starting to figure out what that even means for me." He nodded. Slowly. Then he said, "Okay. Then I am here. Whatever that means, I am here." I did not cry this time. I just looked at him, this 19-year-old boy who was my little brother and who in that moment seemed to me to be one of the most genuinely decent people I had ever known, and I felt something loosen inside my chest that had been tied tight for so long I had forgotten it was tied at all. That night I slept better than I had in years. Things did not suddenly become easy after that. I am not going to paint this story in colors it does not deserve. Faris keeping my confidence was its own ongoing thing. Figuring out what I actually wanted from all of this, what I wanted to do with these realizations, what they meant for my life and my relationships and my future, all of that was a long and non-linear road. There were days where I felt completely clear and grounded. There were days where the fear came back so hard it felt like I had made no progress at all. There were weeks where I did not go back to Arisha's studio because the weight of my regular life pressed in from all sides and I could not find the space. But the door was open now. And once a door like that is open, truly open, it does not go back to being closed. You can try to close it. I tried a few times. But the air that had come through had already changed the room and there was no making it exactly what it was before. Months passed. Arisha finished her documentary, without the footage of me, by my request, though she included some of our conversations in audio form with my voice modified, just the parts that I approved. The response to it was remarkable. People responded to the identity exploration themes in ways she had not anticipated. Strangers messaged her about their own hidden experiences. It screened at a small film festival and won a student award. I sat in the audience that night watching it and hearing pieces of my own story, unidentifiable, private, mine, reflected back through art, and something about that felt like a kind of completion. I am still in that journey. I am still figuring things out. I have not solved anything neatly. There is no neat solution to offer you. Life is not a conclusion, it is a process, and my process is ongoing and imperfect and sometimes bewildering and sometimes, more and more often, genuinely, quietly beautiful. What I can tell you is this. There is a version of you that exists beyond the wall you have spent years building. There is a version of you that your fear has been keeping in a locked room. That version is not dangerous. It is not broken. It is not something to be ashamed of. It is simply you, the part of you that got too scared too early and learned to hide before it had a chance to find out whether hiding was even necessary. It might not be necessary. It might be that the world is bigger than the corner of it you have been allowed to see. It might be that there are Orishas out there, people who will hold a camera and a space and a box of tissues and say thank you when you give them a tiny fragment of your truth. It might be that there are Pharisees out there, people sitting right next to you in your everyday life who already sense something and are just waiting to know how to show up for you. I am not asking you to do what I did. I am not even asking you to do anything at all. I am just asking you to, maybe, the next time you are alone in your room at night and that door in your chest starts to make itself heard, I am asking you to not immediately slam it shut. Just listen for a moment. Just let yourself hear what it is saying. It might be the most important thing you ever hear. My name is Zion. I was 22 years old when a university project, a kind stranger with a camera, and a sage green embroidered top quietly changed everything. I still live in the same city. I still have the same family. I still have the same face in the mirror. But something about the way I look at that face has changed entirely. I do not turn away anymore. And that, for now, is everything. That is the whole story. Or rather, it is the beginning of it.